gentleman is a lifelong member of the Township of Durrell. Who has strong ties to the village of Lakefield. He's a member of a very talented music family, a retired teacher, always a farmer, and quite well known for his organizations for the horse-drawn sleigh ride parties that he takes place at his farm. So with any other delay, I'll introduce our guest this evening, Keevan Leahy.
Thanks, Harold, and good evening, everyone. Can you hear me without the microphone? Okay. I prefer it that way. Well, the only way I can talk to you at all is with some notes. Otherwise, a lot of things will be left out. Maybe you'll say when I'm finished, might have been better if you did. Anyway, Harold asked me if I would tell you something about our old family coming to this country. And I wasn't around, but I've read a little bit about it, so I'll try to tell you a little bit about that. When Harold asked me to come, I can tell you honestly, I felt, Lakefield, what can I do to help Lakefield in the way of history or add to their historical society work? But I couldn't say no. That's why I'm here. Because Harold comes to our sleigh ride and brings a team of horses. We want him back. But believe me, when I started to think about it, my links with Lakefield go back, you'll see, a long way. And there are many. So, first, our own family. I tried to condense this so it won't take so long. So some of my information will be in the form of notes. In the fall of 1825, as a part of the Peter Robinson immigration, Michael Leahy, his wife Mary Burgess, and Mary Burgess's mother, and 7 children arrived in, I suppose, Scott's Plains, making the usual trip, which you all know about. And they ended up, by choice or by chance, on lot 10, concession 7. And if you want to know where that is, if you know where the big hill is, and the woods there, that's the lot. If you don't know that, it's on the center road and the 6th line. And that's very close to where I live today, or where Bunny and I live. Now, very soon after they got here, the 9 of them were joined by 2 more, because John and William had come in the 1823 immigration to the district of Bathurst, I believe Huntley Township in the Ottawa area. Five sons received lots. There were 3 girls, by the way. Dennis's son, after Michael, when Michael died, Dennis, and that was the youngest boy, remained on that lot 10, concession 7. And this came to my mind, a couple of years ago. I walked to the cemetery down there, and I came across this tall monument, about that high, Dennis Leahy on it. And that was always there, the name and the monument. Anyway, that monument was erected by Dennis Sr. to his son Dennis Jr., who was killed by a log or stone or something like that on that farm when he was only 5 years old. And it made me think that those people valued their families, members of their families. Now, Dennis sold the lot to William Mower in 1870. And from there, he moved easterly a little bit, in concession 2, I think, first, and then in concession 6, lot 11, which is just a lot north and a mile east. Now, this Dennis I've written some notes here. He was a self-starter, a go-getter, able-bodied. In fact, John Delaney, whom I interviewed in 1967 in St. Joseph Hospital as a 90-some-year-old man, told me that he knew Dennis Leahy and that he was a big, strong, dark, able-bodied man. There's a man here who knows more about Dennis Leahy than I do, because he came from Ireland and several years ago married a very, very distant cousin of mine. In fact, I think a daughter of the John Leahy who was in the family. His name is Colin Diamond, and I'd like him to tell you a little more about Dennis Leahy. Colin, would you please?
Well, yeah, I do happen to know a little bit about Dennis Leahy, and the reason being is that I married a Leahy when I first came to Douro in 1960. I worked on the history of the family for 30 years, and then I published a book on it. However, Dennis Leahy, and I don't want to steal your thunder, is the direct ancestor, the great-grandfather of Keevan. And he was a big, strong, strapping man, and he also liked to drink. He also, in 1851, whenever the first Douro Township Council was elected, he sat on that first council. And with him also was his brother Timothy. And the first meeting of that council in Douro Township was held in Tim Leahy's Tavern, which stood at the Five Corners. Also sitting on that same council was a fellow from Lakefield by the name of Colonel Sam Strickland. And in his book, 27 Years in Canada West, he complained very bitterly that he had to sit on the same council with a big strapping man, didn't mention his name of course, who could not read or write. And that was quite so. But Dennis was elected to that first council, and most of his constituents could not read and write either, as the son at the time. However, Dennis did make a lot of money. He formed a type of loose partnership with another fellow from this area by the name of Zacchaeus Burnham. And if you peruse the records of Douro Township, you'll find that Dennis Leahy and Zacchaeus Burnham collectively held mortgages on many, many of the farms in the area. So he was a mover and a shaker, and take a look at his descendants today. The Leahy family, where 11 children are touring throughout the world, worldwide known musically, and also no slouch was Keevan's family. Well, first of all, Keevan's brothers and sisters, not sisters, but brothers, formed an orchestra, and Keevan himself, his children had an orchestra too, so they are a musical family, and I'll say no more. Oh yes, okay, I'm to tell you of one other thing that only came to light this year. I belong to an organization called CARA, and a lady there was doing some research, and she discovered in a book that at the time of the rebellion made by William Lyon Mackenzie, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with, there were, at that time, not everyone rushed to the aid of the government. Some people did not rush to the aid of the government, and if those people happened to be in groups or that together, they were picked up by the authorities and were thrown in jail. And in a book entitled The Life and Times of William Lyon Mackenzie, with an account of the Canadian Rebellion of 1837 and the subsequent frontier disturbances, chiefly from unpublished documents, on page 385, it lists some of those fellows who were thrown in jail, were not charged, and were released a few weeks later. And one of those names on the list is Dennis Leahy, laborer, picked up 24th of January 1838 and was held until the 30th of January 1838 and then released. So, there you go.
Thanks, Carl. Okay, my father was Francis Dennis. My mother was Agnes Garvey. And they had 8 boys. So I'm the 5th generation since Michael. There was another Leahy family, Patrick Leahy family, came in 1825 also. We can't establish that they were or were not related to us.
I had the pleasure of spending the evening with Keelan and his wife, Mrs. Leahy, and we sort of tried to draw some notes up so we weren't jumping all over the place. Mrs. Leahy is here tonight in the audience with us, and after our little chat is over, she's going to accompany Keelan on the piano. Keelan's going to play the fiddle, he's not going to be on the piano, for some musical entertainment. But what did we decide next we were going to talk about?
You want to talk about, you want to tell
Remember,
something about myself?
you and personal life
Yeah.
in your public school.
Okay, I'll try to shorten this down. Anyway, this is where my links with Lakefield begin. I was born on February the 14th, 1923. My parents named me Kevin Valentine. Here's my first Lakefield link. It was a terrible day, so I was told, I don't remember. And my dad took the team of the horses and came to Lakefield for Dr. J.R. Fraser, and I think brought him home again. Now, due to my mother's not feeling very well at the time, not at that time, but a year and a half later, my aunt and uncle, who lived just a mile away, took me just to give my mother a break, and then we went back. However, I remained very much part of the family, and it's just that I wasn't there all the time, but I was there quite a bit. I can't explain that, and no one ever has explained it to me either. But my life has been pretty good in many ways. Now, more of my Lakefield links. When I was a little kid, I'm not very good sometimes, one of the punishments I was threatened with was that they'd phone Bob Webster. Now, do all of you know who Bob Webster was? Well, he was a policeman in Lakefield. And I remember that. Another time, when I was pretty young, I had a loose front lower tooth. And I was complaining about it being loose and in the way, and I would not let anybody remove it. So I wasn't brought to the doctor, but I was at Dr. Alec Fraser's one night with my aunt or something. Maybe there was something wrong with them, but they told him about this tooth. And he asked me to open my mouth, and he put his thumb in and gave it a little shove, and that was in. My first visit to the dentist was in Lakefield, Dr. Gibson. And believe me, I remember that. I had a farm upbringing. I did everything that you could do on a farm with my Uncle Vince. And I learned about nature, just being exposed to it. Farm animals, plants, and all the rest. Where I lived, there were great neighbors. There was lots of work, there was music, there was fun, and everything was done that needed power was done with horsepower, except the Model T Ford. And I'm very familiar with the horse and buggy and horse and cutting. The Duro Church figured greatly in my life, still does. PG Town Store, Ayatt's shop. And I must tell you now that in those days, farmers and others from our area depended greatly on Lakefield for mills, doctor, dentist, shops, blacksmith, hardware. And I was reminded tonight of something else that it wasn't a big industry, but Alice Chapel's father had a shop repairing skates and shoes and things like that. I was there a number of times. By the way, Alice and Connie were in my room at school too. It's nice to see you. I'll give you a couple of instances. One, they bought a new axe, brand new axe. You know, this was in the days of the Solomon axe. And I must tell you something else. Jimmy and Huey Nolan were a couple of bachelors who lived down there. Did any of you know them? Yeah. Okay. Well, they used to work with my Uncle Ben's. And my Uncle Ben's had bought a new axe head at Leonard's Hardware. And the first morning they used it, and the frost, the corner cracked right off. Took it back to West Leonard, he replaced it. Well, that was pretty good. They also had a great respect for the miller in the town, in the village. And you all know who that was. Cora's father, W.J. Charlton. And if I were to ask to think of any spot in Lakefield that comes to my mind more than any other, that would be it. Because it was a great part of farm life. Coming to Lakefield with loads to get milled for feed. We have a dog, we call him Buff. I want to tell you how I got that name. After Jimmy and Huey died, the auctioneer taking care of the sale of the place was there one day, and I asked if I could come and just look around, pick up anything that would be historically valuable that might otherwise be thrown out. And I came across this little book of rhymes, and it must have been Jimmy's and Huey's, or either one of them anyway. And in it was a little rhyme about the dog named Buff. And the dog at the mowers was named Buff, and I never could figure out why they called him Buff. But anyway, my wife and I have a dog, and what do you think his name is? And they've all been Buffs except the cup. I found I couldn't get a better one. Okay, I went to SS number 8, primer to 4th class. I'll speed this up a little bit. Few learning aids, library about the size of that window and about 4 or 5 shelves on it. I'm sure some of the rest of you have experienced the same thing. There were Depression years, little diversion, school fair, Christmas concert, Arbor Day. Entrance exam, where? Right there. I smiled recently. You see in the papers now they're talking about character training in the schools. Well, I had 4 teachers, Veronica Johnson, Marguerite Weatherhead, Anna Murray, and Fergus O'Connor. And I've written here, those teachers deserve to be remembered. One other little thing I forgot. When I started school, the teacher was Veronica Johnson. Where from? Captain Johnson's daughter. But anyway, she boarded with my parents. And after I was there, I don't know how long, she kind of advised them that maybe, this was at Easter. We used to start at Easter and then go back in the fall. You remember that? No, you're too young. But anyway, she decided that I maybe should wait till fall. Now all I can think of since is that, well, I've often done things that I thought weren't very bright, and she detected that right at the beginning.
Okay, next, Stephen, I'd like you to tell us about your background in the Leahy family music. Who taught you how to play the fiddle? What age you were when you started, and carry on through.
Okay? My father, Frank, played the fiddle. My mother, Agnes, played the organ. I think she likely learned on, and the piano. Now, they weren't virtuosos, but they could play. And my grandpa Garvey asked me one day when I was about 13 or 14, can you play Boney Cross in the Alps? Boney Cross in the Alps? No. And I often wondered, was that Napoleon? Okay, about 5 years ago with the English dancers, they brought some new books. And what do you think was in it? Napoleon Crossing the Alps. Oh. My parents gave my oldest brother Olin violin lessons, and they gave the second brother Bob piano lessons. And you know who his teacher might have been? She lived in Lakefield. Miss Grills. Is John David here anyplace? Hi, John David. Anyway, both did learn to play and to read music. Olin taught 5 of us to play the fiddle, just beginners. They entertained at parties, celebrations, plays, the Leahy Orchestra, many dances. Olin was a favorite with Dr. Monroe. I credit Olin and Bob with the music that we've enjoyed since. If they hadn't learned, maybe there wouldn't have been. Olin had a little orchestra once, Bob had one, and Frank had one, as you know, and played at the Ship and Shore. My brother Leo, who became a priest and was in Lakefield for quite a while, played the banjo and the saxophone at that time. My brother Ray played the guitar. Phil and I played for square dances at the Lakefield Pavilion at the request of Russ Brooks a couple of summers. As I said, Frank played at the Ship and Shore. I'll tell you this little incident. Phil and I got a crate for hunting. We had this .22 rifle. The darn thing wouldn't shoot straight. We heard of another one. My cousin out in Dummer knew of this fellow that had one that would, and he'd sell it for $3, but we didn't have the $3. But Father Garvey was having this dance in the old church hall, and I remember being there. You don't remember much about the hall. And he asked my brother Phil and I to come and help with the music, along with Tommy Sullivan. Anybody ever hear of Tommy Sullivan?
Oh, yeah. I knew him well.
Well, I remember the night very well. But one night, we were going to school here, and Father Garvey sent us a message to come into the house. This was after. Now, we didn't know why, but what do you think? He paid us $3. And what do you think followed? We bought the rifle. I still have it.
Does it shoot straight?
You betcha. There weren't many groundhogs around when we had that. No, it was pretty good. Now, we had some specials in our play, and I was included in some of this too. There was the Lady Barn Dance on CHEX in 1942 and 43, and CHEX was a pretty new station then. That was pretty thrilling. We played for an OFA banquet at the King Edward Hotel in Toronto. And, you know what? We played for the Fireman's Ball in Lakefield for a number of years. At the Memorial Ball. It was fun.
How did Neil proud?
Memorial Hall. And one night, between between dances or something, this tall gentleman walked up to me at the front and said that to me, Everett Sloan. I don't know whether I knew him then or not, but anyway, he wanted to know if I would give his boys some help with violin. And I did. Jim and Delaware and Charlie Redpath. Music continues in the sixth generation. That's it.
That's it. We'll mention that song after, and Jim Sloan, okay? Don't forget
Okay.
that.
Okay.
So next, Keelan, we thought we'd discuss your life going to high school in Lakefield.
Okay.
Who you went with and your teachers and the cutter in the winter.
Well, okay. I thought of a few things. Now look, I'm not giving you I didn't come to give you a history lesson. I came to
You came to entertain us and you're doing a very good job.
well, Harold told me, just make it interesting as I could, and I can do this better with this kind of stuff than with the history. There were two reasons for attending Lakefield High School over the decades long before me. One was its reputation, I think, and the other was it was close. And the only one, there were several people from Douro attended before we started, but the one that goes back furthest in my mind was Thomas Moore. And Thomas Moore lived where we live. And he became a doctor. And his son was a doctor also and lived where the Lakefield Hospital was prior to its being a hospital. Remember that? Okay. Now, this Thomas Moore was a son of William Moore from his first family. His first wife died and Thomas was of the first family. I attended 5 years. Two brothers, Leo and Phil, preceded me, and Frank followed me. Can't tell you about going to school without telling you about the Delaney's. Any of you remember that? Well, your brother does.
What's the name?
Delaney's.
Oh, yeah.
They came to school up here, Gerard and Anthony, the same time we did. Now, the biggest thrill that I ever got up to that point in my life was that to come to the high school in Lakefield, I had to get a bike. In fact, that was about, at that time, the main reason why I went to high school. Now, my brother, Leo, along with Gerard Delaney, walked. Leo walked 2 years, I think. Gerard Delaney maybe have walked 2 years too, because they were in the same class. And they just lived a mile down the road from us. But I'll never forget the day I met Gerard Delaney on the road just south of my parents' place, riding a bicycle. That was the first bike around there in my, well, there hadn't been any around. It was Depression and bikes just didn't exist around there. And he cobbled it together by getting parts here and there and repairs from Charlie Banks' bicycle shop in Peterborough. And it had a little bag on the seat with a wrench in it. Now, Leo got a bike, $6. Phil got a bike from Ken Reed, if any of you know him, for $8. And I got one from a neighbor down the road, which had been used some maybe 15 years before in not very good repair, for $2. My brother Phil and I went at it to fix it up, and by the time I had it all fixed, it cost $4.90. And I used to call it the 490 because at that time there were cars called the 490. And I thought the car 490 was a model of car. I learned not too long ago that it was a Chev car that could be bought for $490. I want to tell you also that the Jackman family were great, maybe, along with Willie Garland, who was maybe our closest friends when we came. And at that time, The hind wheel on this bike was so crooked, there were wooden rims, that it couldn't drive it without scraping on the frame. So, Delaware Jackman re-spoke it for me. The new rim cost $1, and I think he spoke it for 50 cents. Remember Delaware Jackman? Used to work in Erskine's store. Okay. Winter transport, horse and cutter, bad roads, buggy, spring and fall usually. I don't remember the weather ever keeping us away from school. It may have, but I don't remember that it did. I do remember staying in Lakefield one night because of terrible weather. And where did we stay? Johnson's. Captain Johnson's, as they remained friends of my mother and aunt over the years. Now the horse was stabled near the cement works, and each day when we went in and came out, we passed by the Wingett's residence. Do the Wingetts that are here remember that? Now, I've got to make a confession. One night I remember waiting for others to come to this table to go home. Lloyd Allen and I got into some kind of wasn't a scrap, but we were fooling around, and we ended up inside the door in Wingett's place, and there was a pail of water there, and spilled it. And we both ran out the door. I didn't know what I should have done. Sorry about that, Lloyd. Did your mother ever complain? Well, she should have. The cutter ride, sometimes very cold. I remember putting the horse in the stable and putting her hands up under the robe or the blanket on her before we walked from there to school to get them warm. One family I want to mention, the Wongs, Chinese family. Yeah. Clever. At one time, or more than one time, I'm sure the four of them were in the school, and I think each one of them was top of his or her class. Well, it was only George and 3 girls. But I want to tell you about George. One day, this would be in 5th form, I won't say who it was, asked George for some help or opinion or something that had to do with science. And George thought for a moment, and then in his wisdom says, well, it just depends.
Just depends.
It wasn't just a yes or no, it was just the staff. John Harvey, principal, Nellie Stinson, science, Bessie Dunn, language, Hugh Barrett, mathematics. Later there were Frank Monroe, E.H. Broman, and Lloyd Minchell. But I think what I want to tell you is that John Harvey, for us, was not just the principal of the school, he was a man of principle. And he had a big influence on each one of us, I think, who attended high school. And we like to remember that. He taught us discipline, he taught us respect. There were, as well as the academic course, there were sports. And I remember in the last years, people who gave their service in the war and some who gave more than their service. One of them sat across from me, Jack Morrison. A couple things. Those of us who came from the country, and they were from Smith and others from Europe too, we used to eat lunch in the library. And there was no supervision. There was nobody there watching us. Mr. Stenner used to come up occasionally, but indeed he didn't come every day or he came every week. So I think there was a feeling we wouldn't hurt anything, although there were some things going on in there that we didn't tell the staff about. But a couple of other instances. 2 people skipped school one day. Well, the next day we were all called into one room by Mr. Harvey, and we got the message. But it was well done. It was something that people would heed. An incident in my own room. I was in grade 9. I did something wrong on Don Smith. And he gave me a shout, and where did I hit? The window. Broke a pane of glass out of the window. Well, you know what? He went home at noon and bought a pane of glass at the hardware. Maybe he bought putty, I don't remember that. And I put it in. And there was no fuss about it. I don't know whether Mr. Harvey knew about it or not. Maybe he didn't. There was a fight in the second floor one day at noon. 2 boys, one of them's dead now, but they were well matched. I've seen a few fights, but they were a match for each other, and it didn't last that long, but they were strong. They were tough kids. And there was no harm resulting. Another glass story. One day at noon, I wasn't there, this is the year before I went. My brother Phil told me one day at noon they were throwing, I think it was basketball around at the top of the stairs, just in front of the office, and just outside the library. Anyway, it was, I should tell you who it was or not. It was Paul Revere, let's say it. Any of you know who Paul Revere was? Well, he came from Durham. He wasn't a Delaney. He was a Maloney, I'll put it that way. Anyway, whether he threw the ball or kicked the ball, it broke one of the panes of glass over the window, that was up over the office door. And there were, I suppose, 4 or 6 panes in it. And they got up, and Phil says, he remembers Jim climbing, where he got a ladder, but it was up over the door, and took every bit of glass out of that window. And whether nobody ever noticed it, missing or not, the glass was so clean, he never even replaced it. Oh, our cutter rides. One night flying our horse, going down through Dentures Field, that was a shortcut on the way home, and Morris, you would understand this. Bridging strap broke and the cutter went up against her heels. Well, she wasn't a young horse, but she took off, and we were still in the cutter, and we remained in the cutter too. But each time she galloped, the cutter would hit her. We got down to the road, and Gerard was on the road driving with Tom in the cutter. And when she came up behind him, she stopped for slowing down. That saved us. I was coming with Gerard to school one morning in the spring, in the, when the thaw was on, and we had a shortcut along the south side of Buckley's Lake, or the marsh. And the cutter, after the year's use, or maybe years of use, was pretty rickety. But when we were going through the slush and the water, it was, well, pretty bad. Anyway, we got to the railroad tracks down here, where the train used to come up on Bluff Road. And whatever happened, a bolt or something caught on the railroad tracks, and that was the end of it. It went down. We dragged it up to, I think we used to keep his horse at a place called Harrison's. We must have dragged it up there, or maybe we left it on the road, I don't know, but I'll never forget that morning. And one night going home, we had a horse and buggy, and Gerard and Anthony had a horse and buggy. And on the Black Road, Gerard decided he'd go by us, but we wouldn't let him by. And the Black Road was only about wide enough for one vehicle anyway. So Gerard took into the ditch. Gerard and I can imagine seeing that wagon, or that buggy bouncing along yet. But he didn't get by. But I was thinking as I wrote this, Gerard and Anthony both joined the Air Force, both distinguished themselves, and I can't help but think, but that venturesome spirit, and they had it, was that it was displayed when they, in the buggy ride, or the buggy passing, was the same kind of thing that took them up into the air, and I can't tell you the details, I did, at your brother's request, there was a little story prepared about them a few years ago. And I just think there's a link between their buggy rides and their airplane rides. Okay.
Well, Stephen, you became a school teacher and went on to be a principal, so we'd like to hear about the decision to become a teacher and some of the students you had, and I understand there's a little story you'd like to relate with the gentleman that's in the audience tonight.
Oh, yes. Lakefield again. I went to Peterborough Normal School in 1940-41. My first school was SS4 Galway, 1941-42, salary $900. Then SS4 Durham for 4 years, 1945-49. And I think that's where I had the 3 student teachers from, where do you think? And they were, as I remember, and I hope I haven't missed one, Murray Patterson, Greg Knotts, and John David Grills. You remember, John?
Yes, I certainly do.
What did you take from that?
I could afford to take a taxi out in the morning, but I couldn't afford to take a taxi back at night. It was 7 miles from my house to your school, and I walked it, and there were no houses on the road at that time. There were all kinds of houses there now. And the last day I was there was a Friday, of course, and we had a snowstorm that blocked all the roads, and I put on my skis, and I skied out. I got there about 10:30, and then working out of the philosophy that what goes up has to come down, I had to ski all the way back. I went into the house and I said, as God is my witness, I will never again put on a pair of skis, and I never have. But I had a great weekend there. It really was.
Thank you, John. Now, after the number 4 period, I got married. And I married Bernice Greenan, and you would wonder at this, but she's the granddaughter of William Moore. And we have 7 grown children and 12 grandchildren. But at the end of my stint in number 4, I went back to the farm. I just decided, oh, enough of this, I'm going to farm. And another little incident I want to tell you about Lakefield. To be in the early 50s, and I can't remember just when, it doesn't matter. But I came to Lakefield in the morning with a load of chalk. You know what that is, it's grain to be ground. We call it chalk, everybody calls it chalk. And I don't know why it was coming up not the block road, but the river road up through Lakefield instead of going up Concession 10, I guess it is, or the Smithworks. But I was coming just before you get to the United Church with a team of horses in the load, and one horse slipped on the ice and down and broke the pole. The pole is the tongue of the sleigh. Now it didn't break right off, it just split. But I was able to maneuver up to the mill with the load, and I decided, well, I've got to do something with this before I head home. So the only place to get repairs is the blacksmith shop. And I don't think I knew who the blacksmith was then. I knew Roy Boyd, but I don't think I knew who this was. But I went down there, it was pretty nearly noon when I got there. And I remember explaining my situation to the blacksmith, and I don't know what he said. I can't remember the thing he said. But anyway, he was going to lunch. So he left me there to fix up my pole as best I could. I did with a couple of bolts. He gave me tools, a couple of wrenches, and brace and bit, and I did it. And I hope I paid him for the bolts if I got them there, or maybe he got them at Lim's Hardware. Was Bob and Cracken there then?
Probably.
Because I remember when Bob was there. Anyway, it turns out that the blacksmith was Hermie Kidd. Somebody told me that, or maybe I knew it then, I'm not sure. And You know who Ernie Kid was? Some of you do, maybe some of you don't. But this man's father. I didn't know that till this last week, when we moved out. But I often thought of that, how kind it was of him to let me there during the noon hour. There was nobody else, just me alone. I wonder if that would happen today. I guess it would some places. But anyway, I appreciate it. Really did.
The bill's in the mail.
Well, that's fine, okay. I owe it. Okay, St. Joseph Duro. Oh, I went to number 5 then. They couldn't get a teacher. Imagine going because they couldn't get a teacher. But I was only there a year and part of a year when they decided to build a new school in Durham. So they built a new school, 4 rooms, 143 pupils, around there. I was the principal. There were 3 other teachers besides myself, and we were all from Durham. But we're pretty honest. But I'll never forget the thrill of walking into that new school. Of course, I'd been in it several times before it opened in January the 3rd, 1956. But from the one-room schools, which were good, and I think did what was expected of them, they were getting pretty drab inside. We put up a lot of pictures. You taught them, didn't you?
That year you're speaking of, at Christmas, I lost, I think, 17 pupils to you. I was at the Bolton School there. And they must have been smart kids, because they probably led your class when they went.
I remember.
I had taught them for 3 months.
Oh, here's one of them. Anne.
Oh. I think I was taught more by the pupils than I.
Well, you know, sometimes we can all say that. Anyway, it was like a new beginning. There were 5 schools closed at that time. Well, that's reasonable. That's why they built a new school. There were 2 people who assisted me greatly at the beginning. Well, not just at the beginning, but all through. One was Father McCarthy, our parish priest, and the other was Bill Counts. Father McCarthy was just a source of strength to me in that school. I'll give you a little instance. One time we got some new books, and I was looking through them, and there was some stuff in them that I didn't think kids maybe should be reading or need to read at that time. So I mentioned it to him, because I used to talk to him about once a month. And I never came out of there, but then I felt better. But I told him about this, and his reply was, "You can get other books." I said, a few things I remember. We had a violin class there for about 10, maybe 11 years. And we had a professional teacher come. I couldn't do it because I just didn't have time. Anyway, I didn't feel I was qualified to be doing the job. So we had a good teacher come, and several pupils learned to play to a stage, but only, well, over 15 remained at it. However, that's not bad either. The music festival, I used to enjoy that. I had the grade 8 write family histories. And while we were there, in 1967, Durrell printed its book. It was the first book after Peterborough's book to be printed. But I had close ties with that. And that was the year that Dr. Gassel had the big sleigh ride in Lakefield. Any of you remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. I was there with the team, and the sleigh that Huey Nolan told me was bought in 1885. A 2-seater passenger sleigh. But John Moore, a neighbor, and I decided that to celebrate Centennial, why don't we have a sleigh ride at the farm. I had one at the school 1 or 2 years before, just for the grade 7s and 8s. And we, maybe we'll have one and have it down over the hill there. So we did, and it was quite successful. Had a terribly cold day, but bright and sunny. Beautiful, beautiful sun, no wind, just cool. And I can prove that if I show you a picture in the book of the horse's mouths frozen with, well, their mouths weren't frozen, but the saliva frozen all over them and all over the neck yoke. And it was to be just for that year. Well, as some people know, it has remained, or it has continued ever since. We're looking forward to the 38th year this year, but we missed 3 years because of poor conditions. I retired in June 1982. And of course, with all the money I made teaching, I don't have to do a thing now. It's now an organic farm, as some of you know. And my son Peter is, sometimes I can tell you what he is. Today was one of them. We were pouring cement and we were doing other things. Anyway, that's the end of my story.
Okay. Now, tell us something about your family farming, when you done your farming, Keegan.
Well, I kind of told you some of that
We've already
with the other. But I bought my first tractor from Cephas Bolton. It was 3 years old. And this year I had spent some money on it. It's a John Deere AR, if any of you are farmers. And it's just pretty nice to have it. It's not an antique, but it's an old tractor. And it's in pretty good shape now. And when I walk by it, I feel good. But I did everything with horses. I plowed with horses. I didn't plow with a single plow with horses. I plowed with double plows. But I learned a great feeling for nature. I did. I really don't think that we pay enough attention to nature. There's a lot to be learned just from observing.
Here. Here, here.
So the next thing I have,
What's that?
the dynamite explosion.
You're right on. That's what I wanted.
Okay. I mentioned Jimmy and Huey. Well, I'm going to read you Jimmy and Huey. Oh, I should tell you. I must be missing a page here somewhere. Fingers are getting, you know what they're getting. Anyway, I'll tell you what's on. On September the 4th, 1885, two men, change that. Yeah, two men were carrying explosives with a team and wagon from Tweed to, this wasn't on September the 4th. In early September, two men were bringing a load of explosives from Tweed powder mills to the Burley Falls lock. They had stayed in Mrs. Smith's hotel on the boundary between Durham and Otonabee overnight. They left there about 7 o'clock in the morning with the team and wagon and the load, and it was 20 cases of 100-pound weight of explosive. Now, when I say it's explosive, some people say it was dynamite. It's commonly called dynamite, but whether it was dynamite or nitroglycerin, there seems to be some doubt there. And they came over to the 6th line. The hotel I'm talking about is on the 3rd line, right at the boundary, on the south west corner. And it's still there. The brick building, if you're driving by someday, you can probably identified. But they were driving westerly to the 6th line and then up the 6th line. And my Uncle Vince told me, and he wasn't the person to tell wild stories, that morning these men came in and watered their horses at a well halfway in the lane, took some apples off the trees, and went on their way. Now that was about a mile north of the Warsaw Road. You know where the Warsaw Road is? The county buildings. And in a very short time there was a terrific bang. About a little over a mile up the road it blew up. And no one has ever been able to say exactly why, but I'll read you what I gathered from Jimmy and Huey Nolan on December the 18th, 1966, because their father was living in the house just within maybe 100 or 200 yards of where it went off. One man was George Morton, and the other was James Simmons. Jimmy and Huey, I'm going to quote from them. They were thrashing across from Harry Reels. James McCliggett Sr. was the thrasher. Ed Nolan was helping McCliggett. The place was then owned by Thomas Nolan, and the explosion stopped the horsepower. Ed Nolan was feeding the mill. All the horses stood with their heads down. None went down, though. Saw the smoke, jumped off the feed board, and ran to home. The first, and in going home, he'd go by the place where the explosion happened. Now, do you know where this is? Or do you want to know where it was?
Yeah.
Well, do you know where the center road crosses the concessions? Or the 6th concession? Or what used to be called the Big Hill? Know where that is? You come up the road, less than a mile, and there's a swampy area. It's the fringe of Buckley's Lake, really. I suppose it was part of the lake one time, maybe. There's a red brick house on the east side of the road, that is, the top of the hill. And the explosion took place just down at the bottom in the bushy area there. It's not hardwood trees, it's just small and scrubby stuff. Some evergreens. You'd know more, that's exactly where it is. There was a hole, some of the newspaper reports, they're not all the same, but there was a hole made in the ground, 10 feet deep in places, and 100 to 150 feet long. And the reports say that everything was blown to bits. Huey and Jimmy told me, I'll go on here. But it's nice to get it from somebody who was pretty close. Then Thomas Webbs was the next one to arrive. Now Thomas Webbs just went down south of it about half a mile. No, a little more than that. Then Mrs. Ed Nolan carried Jimmy in her arms. This Jimmy that I'm speaking of, one of these bachelors. Willie Moher was in Joe Nolan's property looking for cattle, so he wasn't there. Now, that was in lot 13. Now, this happened at the corner of lot 12. If you're thinking about it, or corner of it. The explosion knocked the old mare down on her knees. Knocked Dan Nolan on his knees at the foot of Thomas Nolan's hill, where the dynamite went off. Now, I'm quoting them. Now this is interesting. The night before, two of the men at the threshing met, Fred Nolan and Tommy Ed Nolan, and a ball of fire went between the two of them up the road, right where the explosion took place. I should explain that it was, for a time, thought that there were ghosts in the area. There had been a tragic thing happen very close there. And it was not only these might have talked about seeing lights and fires, and, well, lights more than fires. But the explanation, if this did take place, and it may have, the explanation that the scientists give is that methane gas forms in the areas like this Buckley Lake Marsh. And if there were lights, and there may have been, that's what they were seeing, not ghosts. But it was almost popular then to see ghosts, I think, wasn't it? Well, they never found the bodies of fingers in branches or something like that. I don't think they found really anything. Now, I'm sure there were wagon parts, but I don't know that any of them exist. There was a piece of wagon pole in a hotel in Peterborough for some time, but I'm not sure, but probably that's long since gone. But I do have something. And I know this is what you're seeing. It's a piece of one of the wagon tires. The wrong date's on September 84, it should be 85. But, a little story about this. When I was about 13 or 14, I think, this used to lie on the ground under a lilac tree at the place where we live. And there were 3 lilac trees, because lilac trees were popular then too. They'd been planted years ahead and bushy up. And the hens used to scratch under the lilac trees because the soil was kind of loose. And this was lying there in the dirt, and I knew it for a few years. And one day I thought, that thing should be taken in and kept. I didn't know what inspired me to do that, because I wasn't that bright. But I took it into the house, it's been there since. But that's maybe the only relic of the explosion. But I have another thing that was unearthed when they were turning the road into a highway. I can't be sure that it was in the explosion, but it might have been. It was found, dug up out of the ground when they were doing the highway. Made the road, the road was just an ordinary country road before that. And that was turned up, and Huey and Jimmy were the ones who, I don't know how they got it, whether the men on the road told them about it or not, but anyway, they kept it, and my brother Ray bought that farm, or that piece of land where they are, and his wife ended up with it. So I called her this week, and she gave it to me to show you. Now, whether it's from that explosion, I guess we just can't say for sure. But it sounds as though it could be, and I think Jimmy and Huey thought it was because they kept it.
Even, how old was the horse? Can you tell from the teeth?
No, but I know horses I can't.
Okay.
No, I can't. But the teeth are in good shape.
Yeah.
And the these are too.
Yeah.
They're missing. Now, the Durrell Historical Committee, we're not a society yet, are planning to maybe put up some kind of a marker there, if we're allowed. Now, Huey and Jenny gave me this explanation. Might have been. The glycerin leaked. Oh, there was one of these cases apparently not filled, and there was some fear that wasn't a good idea. But Huey and Jenny said that the glycerin leak was running down the side of the box, wheel struck a stone causing a spark, and that might have caused the explosion. You've got anything else to say,
Just the one thing, you were going to tell the story about the fiddle tune and Jim Sloan and the Big
Well,
Hill.
I'll get that later.
Okay, very good. Sorry, I didn't want to rush you.
I just want to say this. In doing this little exercise, I realized how the village of Lakefield was a resource for Durrell, Smith, and the surrounding communities. And you might think of it, but Lakefield made a big contribution to life in this area. And I mentioned examples, and I want to say also that besides the ones I mentioned, there must have been many more. I have a box, a pine, or we have, a pine box at home that was made by a Mr. McDonald just opposite the blacksmith shop. Any of you remember that? Well, there you are. One other thing. Now, I also think, as well as Lakefield serving us, maybe we served, when I say we areas around, served Lakefield a little bit by our business. And it works two ways, doesn't it? But I think we can all be kind of proud of life in this area. Also, I think we owe a great debt of gratitude to our ancestors and to those who lived before us, wherever you live. And it's a challenge to us to do the same for those that might follow. One thought I've had lately, well, not just lately, but over the last year or so, I think the most important part of life is being able to live, express yourself, to use the gifts that God gave you, find what they are and use them. And I think one way, as well as your work, whatever that is, to do that is through the arts. I think there should be more emphasis on the arts in our education system, or maybe in our homes, because that's when whoever you are really comes forward, and you can sense it in everybody at times. You know what they love, what they can do, and will do for you. Thank you very much.
Well, on behalf of the society, I want to thank you very much, Keaton, for coming out. You've been most informative and very entertaining. Thank you very much. Now, I asked Keaton to bring the violin along, and he agreed to do that. And he's going to give us some entertainment. And Mrs. Leahy is going to join him on the piano.
I must tell you, we have played in this room quite a number of times. I brought this violin tonight for a special reason, for you. And I haven't played it. I'm playing another one, but for this evening I thought this was appropriate. I bought this violin in 1975 from a store in Toronto. And I bought it for two reasons. One, I liked the sound, and the other was, when I looked inside, it was made by George Ferguson in Edinburgh, Scotland in 1823. And that's the year, as far as I know, but I have an authority here, I better be careful. the first Leahys came to this area. John and William, right? Colin? Am I right? And I thought, well, go back. So we're going to play a Scotch song called "My Home." Are we? I mentioned Jim Sloan, Delmer, and Charlie Redback. A couple of years ago, Jim composed a couple of tunes, fiddle tunes. And one of them, he called it The Big Hill. And Jim was doing a little thinking. He based it on his trips down with his dad in the 29 Chev to get lessons at, well, our place. And it has three parts. Most of these old tunes have just an A and a B, but this is an A and a B and a C. And the A is when they were leaving Lakefield and out the Block Road and down Handerhands Hill and through the swamp there, or not swamp, but the low area. And the next, the B part, is when they were ascending the big hill, and at that time they used to have to change gears to get up, make it around up to the top and around that little curve at the top, if any of you remember it. And the third was just the rest of the way and down the road and in the lane, stop. So, the big hill, but I may have to watch the other. This doesn't fit the violin worth darn. Okay. Play a little tune that my brother Phil and I and Leo Mady and Willie Garvin well, we did play it. I'm not sure if we were all there together, but we used to play together. always played the guitar, and my brother Leo played the banjo. We play this at the Literary Society in Lakefield High School. And it's called Rock Valley Day. Everybody knows St. Anne's Real.
No artist gets away without having an encore, so just two more. We got lots of time.
Well, I don't know whether I want him at the sleigh ride again or not. This is an Irish song called The Rose of Mooncoin. I may have to put the music a bit.
into getting up with you?
You like a song? You sing a song? You sing a song? Irish song?
If there's one that we both knew.
When you name one, maybe I could play. Wait, any more?
No, that's too tough. You'll come back, Paddy, right, to the old teachers.
Just another Irish song. We'll play a little tune, and you look to that and see if we're ready to do
Oh, there's one, the other is free.
Elevator Street?
Yeah.
Know that?
Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. That's
You
beautiful.
want to sit there, or you want to stay there?
Well, I don't know. We'll just try. We don't need the mic.
Colin wrote a book after he was married to Anne a few years called The Children of the Settlers. And there's a lot of the Leahy family in it. He's researched. We never did this before.
I've met some folks who say I'm a dream, but there's no doubt there's truth in what they say. But sure a buddy's bound to be a dreamer when all the things he loves are far away. Special things are dreams to an exile. They take us by the land across the sea. Especially when it happens he's an exile from that dear lovely unloved Innisfree. Moonbeam keeps across the rooftop of this great city, wondrous though it be. I scarcely feel its wonders or its laughter, till once again I'm home in Innisfree.
Hey, one more. How many of you knew Dr. Monroe? Well, Dr. Monroe was the one who was. Huh?
I did, yes.
I'm sure you did. Why aren't you up here singing? Let's get him wild.
Hold this very long.
Anyway, it was Dr. Monroe who taught my brother Olin to play the fiddle. And they had a little party in Warsaw to celebrate, to honor Dr. Monroe, and put up a plaque about a year ago, last year anyway. And we played some music that Dr. Monroe and his orchestra and Olin played in that, used to play. And one of the pieces that they used to play, or Dr. Monroe used to play, was My Love is Better Lassie. He was Scottish, of course, if you know him at all. Born in Scotland, and got to Warsaw for a long time. got a song, Carl?
Kevin, I got one.
What?
Would you like to play my dad's tune?
I'd love to, no, but I cannot. Mean Tommy Sullivan's horseback.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Which one are you?
Jerry. Gerald.
Well, I've played with your dad a few times, quite a few
I'm
times.
sure he did.
A fellow who gave Lakefield a lot of pleasure and a lot of other places too. when we played there.
Yeah, this is all over the country.
This one, I think, is down in one of Don Messer's books. It's Tommy Sullivan's hornpipe, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think so. No, I haven't played it in years, but I can remember it. Key of G. 1 and 2. Meetings in high school. Maybe you were gone then, Cora. You were ahead of me a little bit. But anyway, there was a piece called Coming Through Burley. And I know we played it there one day, and my brother Phil played a little harmony. And that was quite a step forward for us then. So, G. I don't think we've ever played this before. Have we? Coming Through Burley. Coming Through Burley. How you lose your voice. Oh, I'd like to play you a tune that my dad played on the fiddle and one that my mother played on the piano. My dad's was a chatis. I never heard him play it. My aunt taught it to me, knew that he played this. so there's a name, Lord Alexander's real. I can, I remember my mother playing this, she didn't play that fast, but she could play it. Oh, yes, good thing.
Sorry, I thought.
Indeed. We've enjoyed, haven't we?